So this morning we're going to start out at Rocky Springs historical site. This is a old ghost town from the 1800s, I do believe. So see some artifacts, things like that, see what's left over, and we're going to get our day started right here. So the town of Rocky Springs was founded in the 1790s by 1860. The population was around 2,600 people, but roughly 2,000 of those were slaves. And when the Civil War came through, they pulled all the able-bodied men to come join the forces. And in 1878, yellow fever epidemic killed 43 residents, and then poor soil management led to the decline in the crops of the area. Now, atop the hill here is the Rocky Springs Church. Let's go take a look at that. Now, from what this sign says, they still have church services here. This is a Methodist church on the last Sunday of the month, but it doesn't have a time, so I'm not sure if they still do services or not. But the church looks to be actually in really good condition. Now, I was here about 20 years ago, believe it or not. And at one point, if I'm not mistaken, there was a box out here. There's a raccoon. Anyways, about 20 years ago, a little longer than that, I want to say there was a box out here off this area here. I may be wrong, but you push the button on the box and it kind of gave you a history of the town and the church, which I no longer see that here anymore. But still, pretty cool old church. I'm not sure what that means. I'm gonna have to do a little research on that. But if you know what that means, leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what that means. Outside of here, the Rocky Springs Methodist Church. Little information placard here. It says this church was built in 1837 by the Methodist congregation of Rocky Springs. Earlier, the town had been a station for the circuit riding preacher who stopped by only once a month. The church is preserved by former congregation members to hold regular services here and gather here at an annual homecoming each spring. Now, in the early 1900s was the final blow for this city. Boll weevils destroyed their cotton crops in the area. By 1930s, the last store closed. The only thing that remains of the town is the church, a safe, and a few fire pits or hearths from fireplaces. A couple little squirrels out here. It says this cistern here was used by a local blacksmith shop, most likely. Now, if you remember from my one of my videos, a YouTube short, at another previous church I was at, cistern is basically an underwater water tank. They would collect water, keep it in that tank, use it when it got dry season was out, that sort of thing. So it's just a big underwater water tank. But the landscape here is very interesting. I'm standing on top of this hill, and it's about a 40-foot drop down there at the bottom. And here's one of the safes that was left over. It was too heavy to carry off when people started leaving the town. So they just left it here. been here for probably 200 years. Looks like this was the side of the post office. And this is a safe, a bigger safe here. And they said this was probably Drexler's store. So more like a general store where you can get supplies and probably food and things like that. And there's another cistern here for holding water. And across the way there is the church we just previously looked at. There's another one of those deep gullies. That's probably 60-foot gully. It's interesting that this land is like this, and okay, well here's a sign that talks about the erosion. So it looks like they didn't practice very good soil management. Didn't know it back in the day. And that's what led to a lot of this erosion. So it may not have been like this when the people were actually here in the town. But this is how it lands today. This is the lower Choctaw Boundary. Past this point prior to 1820 was Choctaw Nation. John Gregg ran a stand, or what we call today an inn or a bed and breakfast, Airbnb, whatever you want to call it, in a supply store near here. This was the last white, non-Indian owned business before entering Choctaw territory. After 1820, the Choctaw signed the Treaty of Doak's Stand, giving up 5.5 million acres to the United States, thus putting the new border 60 miles northeast of here. When the Europeans entered the trail around the mid-1700s, they found the trail very miserable, and they often needed Native American help for their journeys. Thomas Jefferson wanted to connect the Mississippi frontier to the other settled areas to the north. Jefferson called for a postal road to connect Daniel Boone's Wilderness Road that ended in Nashville to the Mississippi River. In 1801, after the U.S. signed treaties with the Choctaw and Chickasaw Indians to maintain peace, while the U.S. Army prepared the trail for the postal road. And by 1809, the trail was able to be navigated by wagon. The journey from Nashville to Natchez took about 2 to 3 weeks. And today, you can do it in about 10 hours. Now, once the postal road was completed, many settlements were created along the trace and had very successful stands. Now, we talked about the stands earlier and in a previous video. The stands were basically a place to stay the night, get you something to eat, kind of like an Airbnb, bed and breakfast, inn, motel, what have you. One of those settlements ended up being Washington, Mississippi, where we saw in the previous video at the Elizabeth Female Academy, which is the first female academy for women of higher learning in the United States. Now, Washington, Mississippi eventually became the first capital of Mississippi prior to Jackson. Now, just about a block off the Natchez Trace here in Clinton, Mississippi, which is a kind of a suburb of Jackson, is the Clinton Visitor Center. There's some Civil War relics, some artifacts, little gift shop, things like that. We're going to take a look at this place real quick and see what they got to offer in here. All right, so that was a pretty nice little rest stop there. There's some really clean restrooms and some nice Civil War artifacts and history artifacts and things like that. A little gift shop. Picked up a couple postcards and some brochures about the Natchez Trace and the Mississippi Indian Mound Trail. So let's jump back around on the trace and keep on going. Now the speed limit out on the trace is 50 miles an hour. I'm doing 49. That guy just passed me like I was standing still, and there he goes passing somebody else. Now you got to remember, this is a federal park. Federal park rangers will give you a ticket. Highway Patrol will give you a ticket, and it is very costly. I have not got one myself, but I've heard reports of people saying they've got them, and they're upwards of thousands of dollars. Do not speed out here. 50 miles an hour. Enjoy the trip. Don't get in a rush. Now the Natchez Trace was also used during the Battle of 1812. U.S. troops used it to protect the United States from the incoming British troops. Now prior to the invention of the steam engine, when boats and ships came down the Mississippi River, once they offloaded their cargo at either Natchez or New Orleans, the boats were tore apart and sold for scrap because they didn't have a way to get back up the Mississippi River. Now once the steam engine came about, the ships were able to turn around and go back up the Mississippi River. And this is what started the decline of the usage of the Natchez Trace, because prior to that, once the ships were dismantled, the crew would walk back up the trace to where they began their northern journey. Now believe it or not, one of the first examples of organized crime in the United States happened on the trace. John Murrell and Samuel Mason led gangs of men that terrorized, robbed, and killed travelers along the trace. Now one of the places that they hung out at, we're going to take a look at here later on and show you kind of where they were staying at. This is the site of Osburn Stand. Osburn Stand was opened by 1811 by Mr. Noble Osburn. He was known to treat his Choctaw neighbors and American travelers very equally. Now here's another interesting tidbit of information. The Natchez Trace is where Meriwether Lewis committed suicide, supposedly while high on opium. If that name doesn't ring a bell, he was the appointed governor of the Louisiana Territory. Now he's also better known for his expeditions with his friend William Clark, better known as Lewis and Clark. This site here is of the Choctaw Agency. Now what an agency was kind of like a neutral ground where American citizens and the Indians could come to discuss business, property lines, government issues, things like that. So along this area here was where that was held at. Now back side of this lot is a Natchez Trace Trail, a bike riding trail that runs kind of parallel to the trace along the north side of Jackson and Clinton. And here just outside of Madison, Mississippi, which is just north of Jackson, is Brashears Stand and another Sunken Trace, old trace section here. There's some steps you can take. Leads you right down to the trace. The old trace. Sunken Trace. Now you might notice I'm about 105 miles north of Natchez now. If you notice, we're getting further away from the Mississippi River, and the trace is not as sunk as it was as we're closer to the Mississippi River and closer to Natchez. Now what's also interesting is, if you look, there's one section, and we'll walk 20 feet this way, and there's another section of Sunken Park. You can kind of tell right there, there's a hill dividing the two sections. Not sure why that is. If you know why that is, leave a comment section below for me. This is the Ross Barnett Reservoir Overlook. Ross Barnett Reservoir is a 50 square mile reservoir that was made by damming the Pearl River. See if we can go down here and take a look at the reservoir real quick. Just off the side of the parking lot is these 4 posts. I'm not sure what they're for. If you know what they're for, let me know. I'm thinking horses. But anyways, pretty nice little stop, stretch your legs. Guy over there's hanging out in his hammock. Be a little bit nicer if they cut the grass, but still a nice little stop, stretch your legs. Maybe have your picnic lunch, that sort of thing. Enjoy the shade. This is the Boyd site. What it says here, our archaeologists tell us that there was a house here sometime between 500 and 700 AD. And there was an Indian burial mound out here. And it's not one, but it's 2 burial mounds. The dirt was added later on to make one big one. They found 41 skeletons in here when they did a archaeological dig. There's also a placard, tells you about it. In a box here that kind of tells you a little bit more about it. Let's take a look around here. Not a very big mound, maybe about 6-8 feet tall at the most. Let's go around the back side here. It looks like there's another information placard. Let's see what it says. This sign here tells us kind of about how these mounds became technically one mound. It's a 100-foot long mound. Back that way, just over that way there. You can see it's 2 mounds, but in the middle, they added dirt to make it one big mound, or one oblong mound more than anything. Doesn't look like much, but if you know the history about it, it's fairly interesting. Also out here is this interesting tree. Not exactly sure what type of tree it is, but look how the ferns are literally growing out of the tree. Ferns and moss. This is the West Florida boundary. At the end of the French and Indian War in 1763, Great Britain gained control of the territory between Appalachians and the Mississippi River, except for the New Orleans area. The northern boundary of the West Florida was first established at 31 north latitude, which is there on the bottom. It was soon determined that the settlement was too restrictive. In 1764, Great Britain moved the boundary to 32 degrees into the land of the Choctaws and the Creeks, which is right there where it says "You're here." Now, the Natchez Trace played a very important role in the slave trade and in the lives of the slaves. They traveled downward on the trace to become slaves and work plantations and things of that nature. And after 1860, when the federal troops freed those slaves, they were able to use the trace to head back up north if they so choose to. This is the Tupelo and Bald Cypress Swamp. This trail here goes for an abandoned river channel. It says when the channel fills with silt and vegetation, black willow, sycamore, red maple, and other trees will gradually replace the bald cypress in Tupelo. Don't hurry. It'll take several years, 100 years to do that. So let's go take this, I think it's a half-mile loop through this swampy area here. It says this trail can take about 20 minutes. I got a little time to spare. So let's ease on down these steps here. into the swamp. This is absolutely amazing. This is literally 25 yards away from the Natchez Trace. Let's be on the lookout for some snakes or turtles, or simply amazing. Now, this is a dead river, which means at one point it was a flowing river, and over time sediment and silt kind of built up in one area and basically dammed it off, and the river either dried up or maybe changed course. This probably at one point was the Pearl River, but I may be wrong. I'm not sure. Now, an interesting piece of information: just a couple inches of water can lead to a tree growing or not growing. As once you get out of the swamp or the old river, the types of trees change. There's some pine tree saplings, some elms, some oaks that can't grow in the water, whereas the cypress trees can. Now, if you see those protrusions out of the mud there, right there, those are called cypress knees. When the water gets high, that's actually how the trees breathe, from my understanding. It's amazing how Mother Nature adapts to its situations. There's a little park bench here that at one point probably gave you a good view, but not today, a little overgrown. But top of that tree out there, if I can zoom in on it, two big bird nests. Very substantial nests. So that was a quick look at the Tupelo and Bald Cypress Swamp. Highly recommend this. Very interesting way to stretch your legs. See some things you don't see too often. On to the next stop. This is the Pearl River Bend picnic area. When you come into the picnic area, there's a restroom. You can go off to the right, and there's pavilions and picnic tables underneath the shade. And you can come off to the left where I'm at, and there's a couple more picnic tables and a little grill if you so choose to use it. But a nice view of the Pearl River. And this is the river that was dammed up to create the Barnett Reservoir we seen a few minutes earlier. And if I'm not mistaken, this is part of the river that we just came from, where the Cypress Swamp was at. So I'm going to get me a sandwich here. This picnic table looks pretty comfortable. Give me a sandwich and a drink, enjoy the view, and enjoy the rest of the day here for a little bit. And down that way is some more picnic tables and the restrooms. When you come in, those are on your right. And it's right here off the trace. Nice little picnic spot, seems to be pretty popular. And this is the Upper Choctaw Boundary. It was also the place of Doak's Stand. It was also a tavern where I guess they served alcoholic beverages or maybe just drinks. Kind of read a little bit about it there. And they got a map that shows where you are. Oh, right there. And tells you a little bit more about the Indian Treaty if you'd like to pause and read it. Go right ahead. Now just off to the side of the parking lot here of the Upper Choctaw Treaty is the Southern Pines Trail. It's a little informative, probably quarter-mile trail, loop trail that brings you around. Has some placards and stuff, kind of tells you about pine trees, but I'm just going to skip out on this one and continue on down the trace. Well, it's about 2 o'clock, and that means afternoon rainstorms are coming again. I got a couple more stops, and I should beat the rain to these stops, and then I'm going to stop at Jeff Busby Campground. I'm not going to try to beat the rain like I did yesterday. I'm going to get there, find a spot, and just sit in my car until the rain stops. It should be about an hour or so. Gives me time to edit some videos, read my book, that sort of thing. And then once the rain stops, I'll go ahead and pitch my tent out, because I had a wet tent yesterday, and I don't want a wet tent today. So let's see how this goes. And this is the Holly Hill Rest Area picnic stop. There's a couple picnic tables over there, a restroom, and we're on top of a little hill overlooking a cow pasture. Nice little place if you missed the river bend stop. This one's about 30 minutes down the road. As you can see, I got some dark clouds moving in, so I need to get on down the road. This is the Hurricane Creek Nature Trail. We're going to take a quick look down it. It's about a quarter-mile loop trail. It says it takes 5 to 10 minutes to complete. I'm going to try to get done with this before the rain comes because I hear it thundering. Now there's 2 ways to get to the Hurricane Creek from the parking lot. The right side is the short and not as steep. I went on the left side, which is a little bit longer. It has more of a climb, from my understanding here. Get to the top of this hill. Nice little picnic or park bench to catch your breath. And now we're going to go dip back down this hill. And I believe it's going to be towards the creek. Let's go see. And now at the base of the hill, that loops back around towards the parking lot, is Hurricane Creek. It's nothing more than basically a swamp right here off the trace. And there's some information placards about the trees and ferns and that sort of thing. So not a whole lot to see here. If you want to get out and stretch your legs, this would be a good spot. Now here is the right side if you're coming out of the parking lot. It's got some handrails, so if you have mobility issues, they're kind of thinking about you there. So yeah, nothing to write home about, but you never know unless you go check things out. So this is Coles Creek Swamp. I'm going to try to get this done before that rain dumps on me. This is a quarter-mile loop trail through this swamp. It's basically a dead river now. When Coles Creek overflows, it overflows in this area, dumping off sediment, creating this here swamp. If you didn't hear that, that was thunder in the background, so I'm just not going to do a lot of this trail here. But I'm just going to hike around it just real quick, hit this other boardwalk, see what I can see real quick before it dumps rain on me. Pretty neat though. It's not as big as the Cypress swamp we went to earlier. It still is pretty cool. Now the swamp goes off that way a pretty good bit, looks like. This is something kind of interesting. You can see, go over this way and take a better look at it. Looks like a beaver dam. Right there. It goes from that side all the way around. Maybe I'll get lucky and see a beaver. Pretty interesting. Well, it's a good thing I didn't take the full trail, because the opposite end that comes out the other side of the parking lot, it's got full of water. Now I got waterproof shoes, hiking shoes on, but I really don't want to get stuck in the mud anywhere. So on to the next stop. This is French Camp. French Camp was started when Louis LaFleur started him a stand just out in that area there. Now Louis, or Louis, however you want to say it, was French. And then all the patrons started calling him the owner of the French Camp because he was French. Now, another important little history fact here. This is where Andrew Jackson and troops stayed during the War of 1812, possibly right here in this field. So I've made it to the end point of my second day here on the Natchez Trace, here at Jeff Busby Park. Jeff Busby Park was named after Jeff Busby, who was a congressman who was instrumental in getting the Natchez Trace Parkway taken care of, built, that sort of thing. Now this park is located just outside Eupora, Mississippi, and it has two sections. Actually, it has three sections. It has a picnic area, and then there is a hiking area with a overlook and a exhibit shelter, a trail that kind of goes along the road there, and then a campground. Now I'm actually already got my tent set up in the campground. It's right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk the main road, go out there to the overlook, take that little mountain trail, and come back to my tent. The rain has pretty much gone away. There might be a little bit later on, but nothing to worry about, I don't think. There was a little bit of bad weather that came through, but I think it skipped over this area for the most part. So everything's fairly dry, a little damp, but no problem. But I'm gonna walk on up the road here, hit that little mountain trail, and head back to camp and see what happens. Now I've been climbing this hill for the last 8 to 10 minutes. There better be a nice view at the end of it. But I know one good thing is going to come out of this. I'm going to be a little bit tired after this. Not used to all these hills. And hopefully that'll let me go to sleep a little bit better tonight. So 10 minutes later, I made it to the top of the Little Mountain Outlook. Now from my understanding, before the National Park Service bought all this land beside the trace, all this was farmland. And you could see clear off to that mountain. And a lot of it was just farm fields. They said at one time, a squirrel could go from Maine to Texas and never touch the ground. There's that many trees. But now, since the Park Service took this over, nature just took back over. And just off to the parking lot of the overlook is a little mountain trail. It's a half-mile loop. Takes about 30 minutes in the loop, so we're gonna see what's going on. But this is going to end back at my campsite. We are right there at number 4. I'll wiggle on around, and my campsite is right there. So I'm going to enjoy the shade and the trip back down the mountain. Maybe we can see some wildlife. Nice and peaceful and cool back here. Yeah, I like this nature trail, or hiking trail, whatever you want to call it. I like how when you're going downhill, it actually has like steps, so it doesn't wash away the dirt and everything, erode everything away. But here we're coming to a T in the trail. And there's a little waterfall, a little natural spring coming out of the side of the hill. This is not one, but two springs coming out of the mountain here, or the hill, whichever you want to call it. The walking path, that left side goes right there. Oh, 30-foot hill right here. Pretty interesting. It goes off in the spring and heads on down the hill more. Pretty cool. Now, if I'd have taken that footbridge off to the right and continued on, it just loops back into this trail I'm on here. It's just a little side trail, but it's right down there. This one right here is the one to the left. It's a little bit shorter, I believe. Kind of goes up the side of the mountain. That one's kind of towards the bottom of the mountain, or hill, whatever you want to call it. It's a Mississippi mountain, okay? We don't get mountains in Mississippi. So this is going to have to do. And also at each intersection or T in the trail, like this one here, there's a little map for you. And we're at number 3. And we're right there at that T. We're going to keep on going on and follow it on around down to number 5, right there by our campsite. This trail's pretty well maintained. It gets a lot of foot traffic. It's got this gravel base to it, which is kind of a good thing. It doesn't wash away as easily. But one of the things is, if there's any wildlife, you're pretty much going to scare it off unless you're in this section like this. There's a lot of pine straw and things of that nature, softer material. It looks like the trail used to go that way, but for some reason they don't want you going that way, and that's no problem. I don't feel like doing no bushwhacking today. We're just going to follow the right trail. But anyways, maybe if you could get you one of those little tripod chairs, bring it out here, find a spot, and just sit for a little bit, you'd probably see some wildlife. But I think with the rocks and stepping on it, kind of scares them off. Like this area here, there's a lot of this pine straw. It's really soft on the feet. It doesn't make any noise. So maybe I can come up on something in here. We'll see. I just stirred up 2 deer. They're just the other side of this hilltop. Let's see if I can sneak down in here. Catch one on camera for you. Didn't run too far, but they know I'm here. There he goes right there. If you hear, they do a blow sound. I'm not sure if that sound is letting you know their presence or letting you know that they're mad. I don't know if you can hear it or not. We'll see later on. All right, so I'm right here at the end of the hiking trail. It comes out right beside my tent, which is right about midways up that hill. A little bit about the campgrounds. There's 18 sites. Most of them are pull through, so all of them can accept an RV or camper, depending upon the size. And some of them you can put tents on, and some of them can't because of the way the hills are. It's all first come, first serve, free of charge, but there's no electricity or water But there is bathrooms, no showers, just bathrooms. I'm located just to the other side of the bathroom, which is kind of convenient. But yep, I'm gonna get some dinner going at camp. And my camping here will be another video, so y'all keep an eye out for that one. But anyways, appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you next time.